The Golden Globes get roasted and toasted. Iran retaliation is on the minds of everyone across the country right now. Pelosi's real enemy, we'll find out who that is. Also the wildfires in Australia and so much more coming up.
Spoiler alert, season 2 is on the way, so in the end, he obviously didn't kill himself. Just like Jeffrey Epstein. Shut up. I know he's your friend, but I don't care. You had to make your own way here in your own plane, didn't you? Right.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. It was quite a weekend, quite a day to get to. I know the most important, the biggest story in the world is certainly the anticipation of what is going to come from Iran. We'll spend some time on that today, but I didn't want to lead off with that. There's going to be plenty of time in the days ahead. Right now, it seems like it's just mostly speculation as well. There's not a whole lot that people really know. How could anyone know? So instead, I want to talk to you about the Golden Globes for a moment. I, like many of you, I'm sure, do not care at all to sit and watch people in Hollywood talk about how amazing they are, get awards, discuss their courage. But I do like watching a very talented comedian who I would note is no particular friend of conservatives. It's not like he is someone who, for ideological reasons, decided to make a big thing of making fun of Hollywood. It's not like he's a conservative who finally got a chance. No. He makes fun of Christianity constantly in his stand-up. He makes fun of everybody. But I can respect that because he's a comedian. And he'll go after whomever. He's making fun of things. He's not pandering. He's not bending the knee. Ricky Gervais is one of, it feels like, the very few comedians left these days. And so that's why what he did last night was so entertaining. And I think there's more than just the entertainment factor, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it today, although his Epstein joke was pretty fantastic. There were some other moments as well. Harvey Weinstein, as you may see, his trial begins today. And there was a great Ricky Gervais joke specifically about Harvey Weinstein, saying that the movie Bird Box is about people who pretend not to see anything so they can survive, kind of like working for Harvey Weinstein. That was his joke that I thought was among the very best. He did a fantastic job, but it was amazing to see, because they panned around the room. This is the 5th time this guy's done this. This is the 5th time he's hosted the Golden Globes. The Hollywood Foreign Correspondents or Foreign Press Association or whatever it's called, who even knows who these people are? I mean, I guess it's just foreign journalists that cover media, but they've created this Golden Globes award ceremony that is their most well-known. I guess it's the reason this association even exists. And I would just point out that you would think these different luminaries of our entertainment industry, you would think that they would be in a place that they would understand they're going to get made fun of. That's why they bring this guy in, because people like me, because people across the country, the day after you have one of these Ricky Gervais monologues, people talk about it. It's great press. People care all of a sudden, because these award ceremonies are ridiculous. Look, I don't go to the Washington Correspondents' Dinner. I don't care to go to the Correspondents' Dinner. I will not go to the Correspondents' Dinner. It's boring, mostly. But also, I think the whole thing is kind of bizarre. Well, what's with giving out awards like we're all in grammar school and need a little plastic trophy to put on the shelf? Who cares? It makes no sense at all to me, especially as our cultural elites have gotten so divorced in their taste from the rest of the country. This is how you have movies that get nominated and win Oscars. I haven't even heard of these movies. And I'm not pretending. I mean, producer Mark has more of his finger on the pulse of pop culture than I do. And he would tell you that he's probably not the most pop culture immersed guy around by a long shot. He is shaking his head vigorously right now, side to side. But the fact that I haven't even heard of these movies just goes to show you that there is no question that the people that are making these decisions do not share, broadly speaking, the sentiments and the sense of what's good. In fact, now it's become a point of mockery if you say, why is it that 20 years ago, movies that won Best Picture were universally, generally, beloved? You know, movies like, I don't know, Shakespeare in Love, Saving Private Ryan, The Pianist. I mean, these are great movies. They used to win Oscars, I'm talking about now. But you look at the Golden Globes, the Oscars today, and it's all this wokeness. It's just wokeness. It's all just self-performance, even outside of the performative acts of being a Hollywood celebrity. And because social media has created a circumstance for us where we can see who these people are and what they really think, we recognize that they're a bunch of ignoramuses. And so Ricky Gervais standing up there and mocking them, he also had a fantastic, I mean, we didn't pull that many of his jokes. Did we pull any others, producer Mark, of his jokes specifically? Because, I mean, he's going to deliver them better than I did. But it's all right. If we don't, I can just, play that one.
Apple roared into the TV game with a morning show. A superb drama, yeah. A superb drama about the importance of dignity and doing the right thing, made by a company that runs sweatshops in China. So, well, you say you're woke, but the companies you work for, I mean, unbelievable. Apple, Amazon, Disney. If ISIS started a streaming service, you'd call your agent, wouldn't you? So, if you do win an award tonight, don't use it as a platform to make a political speech, right? You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world. Most of you spent less time in school than Greta Thunberg. So, if you win, right, come up, accept your little award, thank your agent and your God, and...
Second best joke of the night for me after Epstein right there. Many of them have spent less time in school than young Greta Thunberg, who is 16, maybe now 17. Many of them left to be full-time actors when they're 13 or 14 years old. Now, I'm not somebody who believes that you have to have formal education of any kind to be an educated person. It's clearly not the case. In fact, we have the democratization of information in a way now that would have been unthinkable for autodidacts even, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. And you can give yourself, as long as you have someone to guide you along with the basic skills. You have to learn how to read. And probably can't just do that without, you can't just flip on a computer and although maybe we'll get to the point where it's all automated. But you have the skill set now, if you have the basic skill set now, rather, to operate the information machinery around you, you can teach yourself almost anything. That all said, Hollywood stars and celebrities are not an intellectually curious bunch. They, generally speaking, the very, very well-known ones, have actually made it where they are, largely by winning the genetics lottery, in a sense, by being really, really good-looking. We're talking about this room of people. They're all, physically, some of them have gotten, considerably older now, but, the ladies were bombshells and the guys were, leading men, handsome, whatever we call the handsome leading men of today. I don't know. But the point is, they've done nothing to get where they are other than be very lucky in a lot of ways, starting at birth, and then happen to operate within a Hollywood machinery that is as left-wing as the faculty lounge of Wesleyan University. I mean, that's what is the reality of Hollywood today. And unfortunately, it has already made its way into, that wokeness has made its way into these major digital behemoths, places like Amazon and Netflix. And although Disney Plus, I got to give it a little credit. Mandalorian is awesome, and Baby Yoda, this is the way. It's amazing. And Mandalorian's an excellent show if you haven't seen it already. The Witcher is trash if you want to just avoid that. I'm trying to help you out here, save you time. But we already know there's a left-wing tilt to these places. I mean, Jay Carney got hired by Amazon Content as though, he knows something about doing scripted content. He got hired right out of the Obama administration. The Obamas have this Netflix deal. So it's not like it's getting better because the studio system, the Hollywood movie studio system, has broken down and is not what it used to be. I mean, that used to be the top of the entertainment pyramid. You'd go to Universal Studios, you'd go to, I guess, MGM. I don't even know what they're all called. Warner Brothers. You go to these places, and they could write a check effectively to spend $100 million on a movie. Well, Netflix and Amazon, they'll spend $100 million on a brand new TV show no one's ever heard of. So that's or a movie. I saw this movie with Will Smith called Bright. It was a very strange movie. They spent $100 million on that. Most of you, I'm sure, have never even heard of it. It's on Netflix. Watch it at your own risk. My little brother hated it. I think that had its moments. It wasn't terrible. I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't like the worst. It wasn't The Witcher bad. The Witcher should now be an epithet. Like, yo, man, that thing you just did, that was worse than The Witcher. You should just be able to say that to people. But why does this also have a broader, how does this tie into things that matter more to us than just trashing Hollywood? Well, for one, I think that what we've seen is that the cultural elites in this country, just like it has been the case with news media elites, we are now more aware than ever because they expose themselves to us. And I don't mean that in like a whoa kind of way, although they do that too. They expose themselves to us more than they ever have. And so we're more aware of the politics, the beliefs of the people that make entertainment. And this is why even those of you who, you read a ton, you read books all the time, you care about the Constitution, and you listen to talk radio if you listen to this, even if you ignore pop culture doesn't ignore you. This has a tremendous effect on perceptions of tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people across the country. It affects the way they think, and you live in this country with those people. So it has to matter to you at some level what's going on with these individuals. They are incredibly sanctimonious, but also deeply insecure, which you tend to see among elites who are largely unearned in their placement in society. This is true of TV journalists that I talk to you about a lot of the time. I mean, people like Chuck Todd. What's impressive? People like Jake Tapper or what was his name? The guy that I was there in Iraq, except he wasn't. On the plane or the helicopter that hit by. I always forget his name, but he was the biggest newsman at NBC News. Producer Nick is going to send me the name in a second. I'm just blanking on it. But those individuals either just sucked up to the right people in the news media chain of command, Todd, Tapper, I was going to say Jennings, but he passed away a long time ago. I'm trying to think of the guy. Who's the guy? Brian Williams, that guy. Looks and sounds like a news anchor is supposed to. I'm not even sure the guy, again, being an autodidact is fine. I've taught myself much more than I learned in college as an adult, no question about it. I learned not a whole lot in college, and I actually tried to study. But it's one thing if you leave, if you don't finish high school, you don't finish the 10th grade, and then you spend the rest of your life going to cocktail parties and trying to tell everybody how brilliant you are, but you haven't done the work. And these people in the news media and these people in Hollywood who want to lecture us on women's rights and diversity and climate change and all this stuff, they haven't done the work. And it used to be that we had to we had to be able to extrapolate that on our own from watching, from being a viewer of the product that they put out there. But now, because of social media, and they like to put out their tweets and like to do little FaceTime or Facebook videos or videos on Instagram, TikTok, this Chinese site that I still don't really understand what it is, but I've seen it, but I don't really get why people like it so much. I was right, by the way, about Snapchat, that normal adults don't want to put fake cat faces on themselves and have their voices go really high. Like, that's not cool or cute. If you're a teenager, if you're 12, fine. But that's why I knew Snapchat was toast years ago, so I feel good about that. I also knew that the Huffington Post was basically built on a foundation of sand and that it wasn't going to grow and that it wasn't making money, that BuzzFeed was a glorified cat blog, which we've all been calling it for years. I mean, you can see what these things are, but if they raise enough venture capital funds, if they have enough money, they can just force feed themselves to you, so you have no way to escape, no way to get away from whatever it is that they're trying to present to you. Mike.com. I remember that. Mike.com actually tried to hire me years ago, believe it or not. Yeah, I know. And then I saw the front page of their website right before I went down for a meeting, and it was like the most anti-cop, absurd, Black Lives Matter is saving the country kind of stuff I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, I can't. I was supposed to be an opposition sort of columnist from anyone. I was like, this site isn't going to work either. But the media that we have now, especially the entertainment media, is going through a phase that I would say is somewhat similar to the dissolution of monarchy, which now I think there are about a dozen or so monarchies still technically in existence in Europe. But up until World War I, you had monarchies that had real power. And then eventually, it really took a couple of centuries. But people started saying, hold on a minute. Why are these people in charge? What's so good about them? Why should we listen to them? Why should they be able to determine my future or my fate? Now, I'm not saying that, Selma Hayek or Brad Pitt and I actually kind of like those two. I'm sure I should think of some of the ones that I hate off the top of my head, or I shouldn't say hate, too strong a word, that are worthy of particular ridicule. Jennifer Aniston looking like she was going to cry, talking about, Russell Crowe and the climate change problem. I mean, yeah, the brush fires in Australia, we'll talk about that. That's incredibly serious. It's deeply saddening that there's all these animals that are burning there. But claiming that we all have to, that Hollywood is going to lead the charge to change the world and climate change and change the economy, and that's really what Russell Crowe wants. These people are such blowhards. And they must know it at some level, too, which is why they stand up there and say the things that they do in the way that they do. I don't mean, and it might be subconscious, but most of them have been revered for the most superficial of things imaginable. And yet they have much more sway among superficial and, I think you could say, low information audiences. And so they use that. They wield that. But the monarchy of Hollywood, monarchy of the Hollywood studio system is breaking down. And movies aren't what they used to be, as Ricky Gervais said. And we are entering into a phase here where as long as we can start to wrestle control back from some of the major digital, the online, the internet gatekeepers, maybe we won't have to be force-fed this garbage by the Hollywood media anymore. Anyway, that was what I took from Ricky Gervais' speech last night. Just to know that there's a part of me that still feels a little sad for people who I can't tell. I don't know if they're really brainwashed or not, but the LA Times media critic wrote this whole piece in the LA Times after the Golden Globes about how those celebrities, it's been really hard for them because of all the issues, because of Trump and climate change and the Australia, wildfires and all this stuff, that it was really a solemn night, actually, and that Ricky Gervais would go in there and be disrespectful. He missed the mark, and everyone else is like, nope, it was amazing. But I think for a lot of people still, unfortunately, while monarchies are crumbling, there's still a lot of court jesters. And some people, like this LA Times columnist, still have to bend the knee. It's one of the things I love about this show. I never have to bend the knee.
What the United States did yesterday should have been done long ago. A lot of lives would have been saved. Just recently, Soleimani led the brutal repression of protesters in Iran, where more than 1,000 innocent civilians were tortured and killed by their own government. We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war.
That was President Trump on Friday. After the show, he gave a little speech, and I wanted to share it with you because there's so much bad analysis out there right now, and so much stupidity and recklessness and dishonesty among those who are supposed to bring clarity and facts and necessary context to a moment like this, because the stakes are quite high. I don't think we are heading to war with Iran. I would put the percentage at less than 10 that we are going to get into any kind of protracted escalation with Iran that involves U.S. military use of force on a consistent basis and large numbers of casualties. You see, we have to start to define this, because one aspect of this whole exchange, and this does get into some of the most important, it's among the most important things we as a people, we the American people, can consider and think about: war. But also cannot allow to be exaggerated. Right? It can't just be, well, we do nothing or we have all-out war. That's not the reality of the situation in Iran. That's almost never the reality that we face anywhere. But a part of the context that gets lost here is that the Iranians have been doing things for such a long time that would be, in other circumstances with another country, an act of war that would lead to open military hostilities, that we've almost become numb to it. We just take it. We're sort of like Gulliver being, tied down by the Lilliputians with the Iranians. Well, of course, they were able to tie him down for a while, but they're just throwing things at us and trying to agitate us. And because we're so much more powerful than they are, we always say, okay, well, we don't want to overreact. We don't want to miscalculate. people have been talking a lot about the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Quds Force, which is just the external operations arm, right? IRGC internally is part of the repression machinery of the Iranian people. It's very much very similar to what you would have had, say, in the Soviet era with the KGB. And the KGB was an intelligence service. It was also really a paramilitary service, and it was just the action arm, the concentrated violence and brutality of the state. That's really the purpose of it. And so the Quds Force is an extension of that beyond Iranian boundaries and territory, and has been spreading misery and destruction across the region for quite some time, for decades, really. Remember, Iran seized our embassy and took our people hostage. Did we engage in massive military retaliation as a result of that when that happened to the Carter administration? Go all the way back to 1979. No, we did not. Iran was involved in the Khobar Towers attack in Saudi Arabia against U.S. military personnel. Was there anything done major in response to that? No, there was not. Now, there have been some moments in time where we have taken action against the Iranians. I mentioned the tanker war to you before, and there was a very unfortunate incident where a U.S. guided missile destroyer shot an Iranian civilian jetliner out of the sky, thinking that it was an enemy fighter plane, killed, I think, almost 200 people. A very tragic day. So I'm not saying that there has not been use of force and there have not been miscalculations. Clearly, that was a major miscalculation. But this has been going on for a very long time. At what point do we decide that just sanctions and just terse words are not enough? At what point do we turn around and say, this is not going to stand anymore? I mean, Qasem Soleimani was a designated terrorist by the United States government. He was openly plotting against American interests. Now, you could say that our government is lying to us about this, and to that I would say, there are lies that you could excuse, or rather you could understand how somebody in the apparatus could excuse for reasons of politics. There are things that somebody might push aside and say, there's something bigger here, there's something greater here. In this case, I'm not saying this is impossible. The government has lied to us about things before, and the government has been wrong before, and sometimes wrong and lies are a very close call which one you're really dealing with. We were wrong about the weapons of mass destruction as presented by Colin Powell at the United Nations, et cetera, under the Bush administration. We were wrong. And we have to look at the Iraq war now and wonder what exactly has been accomplished here when you have the Iraqi parliament. It's a non-binding resolution they voted on, but saying they want the United States to leave. Understand this. A shift in U.S. national security posture that is meaningful would result in the United States taking an approach where not only are we not going to rebuild other countries, we're not going to do Afghanistan anymore, we're not going to do Iraq anymore, we're starting to get a little bit of that Syria situation. Oh, remember when we abandoned the Kurds and it was the worst thing ever? It was the most depraved act by a U.S. president in history, and all this crazy stuff they were saying. Seems like everything's kind of just continuing on. Life has gone on. There has not been some mass genocide. The Turks haven't, dropped gas all over Syria to kill all the Kurds. I mean, this has not happened. Remember when people were all hysterical about this? And there was so much rending of garments and gnashing of teeth by the Democrats over it. They were so very, very upset. Did they really care about the Kurds? I was telling you the answer was no. Do we think that I was probably right about that? If we have to look at it at this point, you probably have to say, well, I think it's clear that that was all done as a show against President Trump. That was all meant to just be an opportunity to attack him domestically. But and I'll get into the politics of this more in a moment, because there's a lot of moving pieces here, and I'm trying to avoid just there's all the people, the speculation I see. We're going, they might hit us here, they might hit us there. We've done a little bit of that just to fill out our conversation here. But until they do something, we don't know what the Iranians have done. It's the most simple, straightforward. It's so blatant, it's so obvious, it feels weird even saying it, but sometimes you have to repeat And you have to be very clear with statements like that because people are getting way ahead of themselves. We're acting like we're already in some elevated state of hostilities. Qasem Soleimani is one man. The Iranians, when they were fighting the Iraqis in the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, went on for 9 years, they trained Iranian youth to run across minefields to try to clear them. How do you think that worked out? It's effectively telling people it's a suicide bomber where you're not taking anyone out but yourself, effectively. Using human beings to clear minefields. Because that was the mentality. That's the truth of what's in the heart of these mullahs, these theocrats, right? They're religious fanatics, which is frightening. Now, religious fanatics, they still deal with some of the same day-to-day. They deal with many of the same day-to-day constraints the rest of us do if they want to live. But a true religious fanatic, along the lines of the Iranian mullahs, who believe that they are in a protracted war with non-Muslims, with the West, with Israel, with America, they're willing to do effectively anything. And that's why we have this big problem, of course, of Iran possibly getting nuclear weapons, and what would it mean and what would happen after that. But if we're going to change the policy, and this is where the Trump as disruptor fact has to come into the conversation. If we're going to change the policy of the United States when it comes to foreign relations, national security, international affairs, however you want to put it, that means not only are we going to avoid the reconstruction of these other countries, trying to create essentially the neocon approach on the right, done. Can't do that anymore. But that's going to mean something else as well. There will be countries where terrible things happen. There will be countries where we will be quite aware. I mean, this was certainly the case for almost all of Obama's time in office. The Syrian civil war turned into, the eighth circle of hell. How much worse could it really have been? Hundreds of thousands dead, mass rapes, mass murders, gas attacks, whole cities leveled. I mean, how much worse could the Syrian civil war have been? And keep in mind that we took this, under the Obama administration, we took this position that, our leadership was going to try to bring this to a close sooner and that there would be a UN mandate. There was a UN mandate to make sure the violence would end, a political settlement. This was the stuff they're talking about. Now it seems preposterous because they didn't do a thing. And then Obama's Pentagon plan, they spent, I think it was $500 million to put 5 actual fighters into the conflict. And then there are people who still talk about the running of weapons from Libya to Syria to try to help the anti-Assad Syrian forces, jihadists under the Obama administration. I mean, it's just a complete mess, a nightmare. Here's the part of this that gets that gets difficult for a lot of people. Because we just had the Iraqi parliament non-binding vote for us to leave Iraq. If we leave Iraq, things are going to get very, very ugly there. It's going to get very messy. If we leave Afghanistan, I will tell you the truth about this. A lot of people will, thump their chest, especially a lot of the think tankers out there. They'll thump their chest and say, no, we should stay forever. Or they'll say we should pull out and everything will be fine. I'm here to tell you, no, we should pull out and everything's not going to be fine. Because we no longer, this was a promise that Trump was making. No more endless war, no more wars that are unnecessary in the first place, and endless occupation of these foreign countries. And remember, occupation is different from having a base. I hate when people do this. They say, well, we have troops in South Korea. Yeah, because South Korea is a stable nation state under threat from an external regime. I understand that. But no one's really worried that South Korea is going to dissolve anytime soon or that our troops are going to come under assault, driving down the streets of Seoul. They are worried about that in Kabul, in Jalalabad, in coast, in different parts of Afghanistan. They are concerned about that. That is a problem. So I think that this is where we have to say you're going to see a decision point here for the Trump administration in Afghanistan and for Iraq. This is forcing our hand that we will have to be willing to leave these places and leave them knowing that very bad things will happen and that, yes, 82nd Airborne, yes, a Marine Expeditionary Force, our soldiers, our troops, who are good people, who do good things, who are the most talented, exceptional, and humane fighting force the world has ever known. We could stop it but we would have to take responsibility again, and we would have to lose our people, and we don't want to do it anymore. Maybe other countries need to start figuring out some stuff on their own. They're going to be messy, messy places. And maybe all of a sudden, Trump has brought to the fore the possibility that we won't be building these countries anymore. We won't be responsible for their elections and their, no, done with that. And by the way, if anybody in those countries then, or if those countries are used as launch pads for attacks, or even if the national government decides to wage war in the United States, as Iran has been doing, we will go back at them in a way that right now feels perhaps excessive to some of us. But that excess may bring about a new reality where countries know they will no longer cross us, where the idea of a Qasem Soleimani, a very senior government official from a foreign nation state, wouldn't dream of taking selfies and smiling while he's thinking about the next operation against U.S. interests, U.S. troops. That somebody with the blood of so many hundreds of American soldiers who never made it home to this country because Qasem Soleimani wanted to do the bidding of the mullahs in a country that is not Iran, that nobody would ever consider doing that again because they understand if you harm us like this, we will come after you. We will kill you. We don't care what bureaucrats in Europe say. We don't care what the so-called international consensus of media elites, unfortunately overwhelmingly staffed with vain cowards. We don't care what they say. The country is going to take a different approach because the approach we have been taking on a bipartisan basis for the last 20 years has not worked. Some would say for the last 70 years, but a different conversation. So what do I think comes next? Well, for that, I might as well turn to what some of the Democrats are saying.
As president, would you not prioritize the U.S. military killing the leaders of organizations designated terrorist organizations?
Look, the job of the president is to keep us safe. And we know in this circumstance that Donald Trump was presented with a range of options by way of response. But the point is not to try to move us closer to war. The point is to move us away from that.
Well, you see, if Donald Trump is for something, I have to be against it, even if that means taking out terrorists who have done terrible things. Elizabeth Warren as commander-in-chief, folks, that's what a lot of Democrats, at least about, getting up on around 20% of them, give or take, that's what they think should happen. You see this with all these different Democrats coming out now, saying things that are simply absurd. They don't care. They don't care about what the reality is of the strike so much as they care about what the politics of the moment demand of them to say. That is the simple truth. That's what really motivates them one way or the other. Here is, for example, Senator Chris Murphy, who does confer upon Qasem Soleimani a kind of special immunity. Play clip 28, please.
It is an assassination. I mean, this is a top official of a foreign government. This isn't the head of a non-state terrorist group. No matter how bad a guy he is, how evil he was a commanding general of a sovereign foreign nation, and we executed him. So I don't think you can call it anything other than an assassination. It's not the first time that America has been involved in assassinating a foreign official, but it's probably the most high-profile foreign official that the United States military has ever executed.
He seems to forget that when we declared war on Saddam Hussein, we blew up all of his palaces, not just because we wanted to see them glow in the dark. We were trying to kill him. This is the reality. This is why, in fact, even if we're talking about civilian control of a military, when you are the commander-in-chief of a foreign nation and you're in a state of war, guess what? You are in jeopardy. That is the truth. We can say that there's international law that prevents this and all the rest of it, but does anyone really believe if Kim Jong-un was about to tell his missile brigades to launch on South Korea, and we knew that taking him out would prevent that launch, does anyone really think that we'd be getting lectures about how it's a war crime to take out Kim Jong-un. I just pose this to you. First of all, he's wrong on the merits as well about calling this, or just wrong technically about calling this an assassination. This was a military figure in a declared war zone engaged in active hostilities against the United States. Do you think that we could, we could deploy a 3-star general, just, airdrop him into Iran and have him walk around and try to start calling in airstrikes on targets in Tehran? And then if someone, took him out, we'd say, whoa, hold on, that's a 3-star general. You can't do that. That's actually not how it works. But Chris Murphy doesn't care. It's all about trashing Trump.